Welcome to a special documentary episode of Aviation Intelligence Weekly. I'm Sarah, and today we're diving deep into the history of one of the world's most iconic aerospace companies, Boeing.
Thanks, Sarah. I'm Mike, and I've been covering Boeing for over 15 years. This is truly a fascinating story that spans more than a century of aviation history, from wooden biplanes to space exploration.
Today, Boeing is a $77 billion aerospace giant employing over 170,000 people worldwide. They're one half of the commercial aviation duopoly alongside Airbus, and they've delivered over 11,000 commercial aircraft throughout their history. But Mike, this company's story goes so much deeper than just building airplanes, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Sarah. Boeing has been at the forefront of virtually every major aviation breakthrough of the past century. They've built everything from mail planes to military bombers, from the first commercial jetliner to spacecraft that have taken humans to the International Space Station. Their revenue today comes from two main divisions: Boeing Commercial Airplanes, which generates about 60% of revenue, and Boeing Defense, Space and Security making up the remainder.
Let's take our listeners back to the very beginning. Where did this aerospace empire start?
Well, Sarah, it all began on July 15th, 1916, when a 35-year-old timber baron named William Edward Boeing founded the Pacific Aero Products Company in Seattle, Washington. Boeing had actually made his fortune in the lumber business, but he became fascinated with aviation after taking his first airplane ride in 1915.
What sparked that transition from lumber to aircraft?
Boeing took a ride in a Curtiss seaplane, and the story goes that he was so unimpressed with the aircraft's construction quality that he told his friend, Navy officer Conrad Westervelt, "We could build a better plane ourselves." And that's exactly what they did. They built their first aircraft, the B&W seaplane, in a hangar on the shores of Lake Union in Seattle.
So Boeing literally started in someone's garage, so to speak?
Pretty much. By 1917, the company had been renamed Boeing Airplane Company, and they received their first military contract for 50 training aircraft for the US Navy. But here's what's interesting. After World War I ended, military orders dried up, and Boeing had to diversify. They actually built furniture, boats, and even phonograph cases just to keep the lights on.
That's quite a pivot. How did they get back into aviation?
The breakthrough came in 1918 when Boeing won a contract to fly airmail between Seattle and Victoria, British Columbia. This was the beginning of Boeing's involvement in commercial aviation. In 1927, Boeing created Boeing Air Transport, which operated airmail routes and eventually became United Airlines.
Wait, so Boeing actually founded United Airlines?
They did. In fact, throughout the 1920s, Boeing was building a vertically integrated empire. They had Boeing Airplane Company building the planes, Boeing Air Transport flying them, and Pratt & Whitney, which they had acquired, building the engines. They even had airports and pilot training schools.
That sounds like it would create some competitive concerns.
Exactly right, Sarah. This all came crashing down in 1934 with the Airmail Act, which prohibited aircraft manufacturers from owning airlines. Boeing was forced to split into three separate companies. Boeing Airplane Company stayed with aircraft manufacturing, United Aircraft Corporation took the engine business, and United Airlines became the independent airline we know today.
How did Boeing recover from this forced breakup?
Well, this is where Boeing's story really takes off, if you'll pardon the pun. The 1930s and 1940s became their golden era of innovation. In 1935, they introduced the Model 299, which became the legendary B-17 Flying Fortress. But even before that, in 1933, they had created the Boeing 247, which many consider the first modern airliner.
What made the 247 so revolutionary?
The 247 was the first airliner with retractable landing gear, the first with an all-metal construction, and the first with autopilot. It could carry 10 passengers at 180 miles per hour, which was incredibly fast for its time. Unfortunately, Boeing made a strategic error. They gave exclusive rights to United Airlines, which allowed Douglas Aircraft to swoop in with their DC-2 and DC-3, ultimately dominating the pre-war commercial market.
But World War II changed everything for Boeing, didn't it?
It absolutely did. World War II was transformational for Boeing. The B 17 Flying Fortress and the B 29 Super Fortress became legendary aircraft. Boeing produced over 12,000 billion 17s and nearly 4,000 billion 29s. The B 29 was particularly significant. It was the most advanced aircraft of its time, featuring pressurized cabins and remote controlled gun turrets. These were the aircraft that dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, ending the war.
The war must have made Boeing enormous.
At its peak, during World War II, Boeing employed over 45,000 people. But then came the post-war crash. Military orders disappeared almost overnight, and Boeing had to lay off thousands of workers. They went from 45,000 employees down to just 12,000 by 1946. This is when Boeing made another crucial pivot back to commercial aviation.
This brings us to what many consider Boeing's greatest achievement, the jet age. Tell us about the 707.
The 707 story is absolutely fascinating, Sarah. In the early 1950s, Boeing made an enormous gamble. They invested $16 million, about $160 million in today's money, to develop the 367-80, nicknamed the Dash 80. This was their prototype for both a military tanker and a commercial jetliner.
That was a huge risk for the company at the time.
It was a bet the company decision. Boeing's competitors thought they were crazy. But on July 15, 1954, exactly 38 years after the company was founded, the Dash 80 took its first flight. The commercial version became the 707, which first flew commercially in 1958 with Pan American World Airways on the New York to London route.
How did the 707 change aviation?
The 707 literally created the jet age. It reduced flying times by half and made air travel accessible to the masses. Boeing delivered over 1,000 707s, and it established them as the leader in commercial aviation. But they didn't stop there. In the 1960s, they followed up with the 727, which became the best-selling airliner of its era, with over 1,800 delivered.
And then came the wide-body revolution with the Boeing 747.
The Boeing 747 is perhaps Boeing's most iconic aircraft. In 1965, Pan Am's Juan Trippe approached Boeing asking for an aircraft twice the size of the 707. Boeing once again made a massive financial bet, spending $1 billion to develop the Boeing 747, more than the company's entire net worth at the time.
Another company betting decision.
Absolutely. They had to build the world's largest building at the time, the Everett factory, just to assemble it. The first Boeing 747 flew on February 9, 1969, and it revolutionized air travel by making long-haul flights economical for airlines and affordable for passengers. The Boeing 747 earned the nickname Queen of the Skies and remained in production for over 50 years.
Boeing's growth strategy also included some major acquisitions, didn't it?
Yes, the most significant being the merger with McDonnell Douglas in 1997. This was a $13.3 billion deal that transformed Boeing from primarily a commercial aircraft manufacturer into a balanced aerospace and defense company. McDonnell Douglas brought military programs like the F-15 Eagle, FA-18 Hornet, and the C-17 Globemaster transport aircraft.
How did that merger change Boeing's culture?
This is actually quite controversial, Sarah. Many longtime Boeing employees felt that McDonnell Douglas's more financially focused culture clashed with Boeing's traditional engineering-first approach. The merged company moved its headquarters from Seattle to Chicago in 2001, symbolically distancing itself from its manufacturing roots.
The merger also brought Boeing into the defense contracting world in a bigger way.
Exactly. Today, Boeing Defense, Space and Security generates about $26 billion in annual revenue. They're involved in everything from military aircraft to satellites to NASA's Space Launch System. The defense business has provided crucial stability during downturns in commercial aviation.
But Boeing has also faced some significant challenges over the years. Let's talk about the impact of September 11th, 2001.
9/11 was devastating for the entire aviation industry, but Boeing was hit particularly hard. Air travel plummeted, airlines canceled orders, and Boeing was forced to lay off 30,000 employees. They also had to deal with the fact that their own aircraft had been used as weapons in the attacks.
How did they adapt to the post 9/11 world?
Boeing had to completely rethink their business model. They became much more flexible in their manufacturing, developing the ability to ramp production up and down based on demand. They also accelerated development of new, more fuel efficient aircraft. This led to the Boeing 787 Dreamliner program, which was launched in 2004.
The Boeing 787 was supposed to be revolutionary, but it faced significant problems, didn't it?
The Boeing 787 story is both Boeing's greatest triumph and one of its biggest challenges. The aircraft introduced revolutionary composite materials and fuel efficiency improvements of 20%. But the program was plagued by delays and cost overruns. The first delivery was supposed to be in 2008, but didn't happen until 2011, 3 years late.
What caused those delays?
Boeing had outsourced much of the Boeing 787's production to suppliers around the world, which created enormous logistical and quality control challenges. They also had problems with the lithium-ion batteries, which led to the entire Boeing 787 fleet being grounded for 4 months in 2013.
Despite these challenges, the Boeing 787 became successful.
It did. Boeing has delivered over 1,000 787s, and it's become the backbone of many airlines' long-haul fleets. The fuel efficiency and passenger comfort features have made it extremely popular with both airlines and travelers.
But then Boeing faced its most serious crisis with the Boeing 737 MAX.
The Boeing 737. MAX crisis was unprecedented, Sarah. After 2 fatal crashes, Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019, the entire global fleet of Boeing 737 MAX aircraft was grounded. All 346 people on board both flights died.
What caused these crashes?
The crashes were attributed to problems with Boeing's Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, which was designed to prevent stalls. The system received faulty sensor data and repeatedly pushed the nose down, despite pilots' efforts to control the aircraft. The crashes revealed serious issues with Boeing's certification process and pilot training programs.
How did Boeing respond to this crisis?
It took Boeing nearly 2 years to get the Boeing 737 MAX back in service. They had to redesign the MCAS system, improve pilot training, and work with regulators worldwide to restore confidence. The crisis cost Boeing over $20 billion in compensation, fines, and lost sales. More importantly, it severely damaged Boeing's reputation for safety and engineering excellence.
COVID-19 then hit right as Boeing was recovering from the MAX crisis.
The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as the Boeing 737 MAX was being recertified in late 2020, the pandemic devastated air travel. Boeing's commercial aircraft deliveries plummeted from 380 in 2019 to just 157 in 2020. They had to cut production rates dramatically and lay off thousands of employees.
How is Boeing positioned today as we move forward?
Boeing is in a rebuilding phase, Sarah. They're focusing on restoring trust with airlines, regulators, and passengers. The Boeing 737 MAX is flying again, and orders are slowly recovering. They're also developing new variants like the Boeing 777X, though that program has faced its own delays.
What about their competitive position against Airbus?
The competition with Airbus is intense. For the past decade, the two companies have essentially split the commercial aircraft market. Airbus has been gaining ground, particularly in the narrow-body market with their Airbus 320neo family. Boeing needs to decide whether to develop an entirely new aircraft to replace the Boeing 737 or continue with variants of their existing designs.
Looking at Boeing from an investment perspective, what makes them unique in the aerospace industry?
Boeing has several key competitive advantages, Sarah. First, they're one of only 2 companies in the world capable of building large commercial aircraft. It's essentially a duopoly with Airbus. The barriers to entry are enormous, requiring tens of billions in investment and decades of expertise.
What about their defense business?
The defense side provides crucial stability. Boeing is one of the top defense contractors globally, with long-term government contracts that provide steady cash flow even when commercial aviation is struggling. Programs like the KC-46 tanker, P-8 Poseidon, and various satellite systems generate reliable revenue.
But there are risks too.
Absolutely. Boeing faces ongoing regulatory scrutiny following the MAX crisis. They're also dealing with supply chain challenges, inflation pressures, and the need for massive capital investments in new aircraft programs. The company's debt load increased significantly during the MAX grounding and COVID-19 pandemic.
As we wrap up, Mike, what's your assessment of Boeing's future?
Boeing's story is far from over, Sarah. This is a company that has survived 2 world wars, multiple recessions, the jet age transition, and numerous crises. They have over 4,000 aircraft in their backlog worth more than $300 billion. The long-term growth of air travel, particularly in Asia and other emerging markets, should drive demand for decades to come.
Any final thoughts on what makes Boeing's story so compelling?
What I find remarkable about Boeing is how they've repeatedly reinvented themselves over more than a century. From Bill Boeing's first wooden seaplane to today's composite Dreamliners, from airmail routes to space exploration, they've been at the center of humanity's conquest of the skies. Yes, they've made mistakes, but they've also created technologies and aircraft that have literally changed the world.
That's a perfect place to end our deep dive into Boeing's incredible journey. Thanks to Mike for sharing his expertise, and thank you for listening to this special documentary episode of Aviation Intelligence Weekly. We'll be back next week with more aviation industry insights.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been a pleasure sharing Boeing's remarkable story with your listeners.